Hey folks, James Abrenio coming to you Friday, July 18th, wrapping up the week. Been a busy one. Also, both on the work side, but also on the podcasting side. Just to give you a heads up, next week, I'm hoping on Monday to have Senator Saddam Salim come on to talk about what's happening at George Mason University and the Trump's administration's interference there. Also, later in the week, I'll be having Liz White on from Upvote Virginia to talk about ranked choice voting, which should be a pretty interesting discussion. So a lot going on. Just remember, like, subscribe, follow, and hopefully we can get some more viewers on here so we can keep talking about local stuff happening. When I started the channel, I wasn't quite sure exactly where it was going. And as we sit here today, I still don't know either. I'm really just trying things out. And last week, as I was talking with a friend about what to do next, she said, "Hey, come down to the immigration court and let's see what's happening on around there." And given that it's right in my backyard, I'm thinking, well, that is a local issue. There are immigration courts right in Northern Virginia. I think one in Annandale, one in Sterling. Obviously, immigration is a big issue that's happening, and it's a big issue that's happening here in Virginia. Indeed, we've got our own governor, Governor Youngkin, talking about what's going on with immigration. He clearly supports what's happening. He clearly supports the Trump administration. Indeed, I'm sharing an article here by our famous local magazine, Northern Virginia Magazine. We have here, there is a report of ICE arrests have spiked Virginia, specifically in Fairfax County, right where we're at in Fairfax. Since 2024, ICE arrests have increased more than 350% in Virginia, outpaces ICE arrest rates in states like California, New York, Florida, Texas. For the first 5 months of 2025, ICE has arrested more than 2,500 people here in Virginia, and roughly twice as many arrests has happened in Fairfax County. And I did want to note here, which was interesting, Governor Youngkin quoted in this article, "Let's be clear, the vast majority of people that have been arrested at courthouses around the country are committing violent crimes. If somebody breaks the law and is here illegally, they should be arrested." Specifically, Youngkin praised efforts by Virginia Homeland Security Task Force, calling it extremely successful. Let's be clear about what's happening. This is not a factual statement. And if Governor Youngkin thinks it is, he probably needs to take a closer look about what's happening in his own state. A lot of people in immigration court aren't there for criminal matters. That's inherently an immigration issue. If they're at a criminal court, it's not, assuming they're presumed innocent until proven guilty, unless they're picking people up right after conviction, that is not the case. And in fact, I'm getting ready to share with you an article by The Guardian. This is dated July 14th. So just this Monday. It's essentially talking about Stephen Miller's famous alligator Alcatraz, hundreds of detainees with no criminal charges sent to Trump's alligator Alcatraz. The point here being that that the Trump administration, unlike what it had promised, are not just focusing on people with violent criminal records. They're focusing on pretty much anybody. That's the reason you've seen a lot of disruption in Los Angeles and other areas in the country, because they're essentially showing up at things like Home Depot parking lots to pick people up. So this isn't about getting criminals out of the country. It's about getting minorities out of the country. Let's be clear about what that is. And we've all heard Trump even speculating about getting citizens out of the country. I think as recently as this week, he was talking about deporting Rosie O'Donnell, I believe. I can't remember, but it was somebody famous that was a big critic of his. But that's the talk that they're wanting to talk about. So this isn't just about getting folks that should be removed from the country, because just remember, Democrats aren't most Democrats aren't as anti-immigrant law as Republicans and MAGA try to make it seem. In fact, I would argue that Democrats have made a true push. Now, ineffective to have immigration reform. It's just the Republicans have never worked with the Democratic Party you hear about DACA, and I remember folks trying to work out a deal there, and Republicans just pushing back and not allowing anything to be done. I'm not an immigration expert. I'm not going to sit here, though, and get into an argument about who's wrong and right. I do think there's failures on our side of the aisle about dealing with the immigration issue. I think the Biden administration had a lot of issues with dealing with the immigration issue, and we all kind of in it together. But what I have real issue with is the manner in which the Trump administration is dealing with the immigration issue, and it to me is not about immigration. It's more cynical than that. It's more honestly racist than that, as I see it. But anyway, so getting back to the story, a friend suggested let's go down to the immigration court, and I said I'll take you up on that. That sounds interesting. Let's see what's happening in the backyard. We made it down to the immigration court. Now, I want to be clear. I've heard stories, including from my friend, that there have been really, really stressful, tragic incidents happening where you literally see dads being pulled away from their kids and their wives and being, thrown into vans. When I was there this day, immigration authorities were not there, so it wasn't that dramatic. To be clear, I'm sure the friend that told me doesn't have a reason to lie to me. I'm sure that's happened. I mean, we've all seen kind of the violent things that have been happening across the country. Just the day that I went didn't happen to be there. It was more kind of a quote slow morning, if you want to call it that. Getting into immigration court is a lot like just any other courtroom in the country and the county. You go in, you got security guards, they're doing their thing. You go in, you got clerks doing their thing. You go in, the bailiffs are doing their thing, and the judges are doing their thing. I want to be clear. If I do recommend you go and observe in your local, not only immigration courts, but also criminal courts as well. I always recommend people go observe. But if you go to the immigration court, be respectful. Number one, most of those folks are just doing their job. They were there before the Trump administration. They'll be there after the Trump administration, hopefully, and they're just trying to get the job done. They're not there most of them are not there to hurt people. It's to do the job. It is a court process. Most folks there are respectful as they can be. And so if you're going to go there, show respect, number one, because I think the court, even in an immigration court, deserves it. But also, I think it gets you more access. If you're polite, if you're kind, they're more likely to show you around. They're more likely to help you if you're lost. They're more likely, if you're walking into a judge's courtroom, if you're respectful, they're more likely to not give you flack for being there. I just think it's a more persuasive way to do it. Also, I'm a criminal defense attorney. You do not want to get in a position where you're having some type of physical altercation and all of a sudden you're charged with a crime. Other people may have some philosophy about protests and violence. I'm not that guy. I have no problem with protest. I have no problem with speaking your mind. Obviously, I'm doing this podcast, but I do think that you need to do it in a legal fashion, not only for the safety of the people around you, but I think it's also more persuasive. Even if you encounter ICE law enforcement, you do not want to have some type of physical altercation and face the criminal charge. You can observe and follow the law, but again, I think it just from a persuasive standpoint, it's more useful that way. But again, you do you. I'm just a guy trying to observe what happened. But when I walked in, the first interaction I had with somebody trying to find their way, because we were trying to find ours, I'd never been in the courthouse before. A lady told me that she had a family member that was supposed to have court this day. He had been detained, taken to Arizona, and they moved his case without any notice. And so apparently it was supposed to be in a couple of weeks, and she doesn't even know what next steps to take. And I'm not an immigration attorney. I gave her some thoughts as a friend, but I couldn't tell her, legal advice. I said, talk to the attorney and do your thing. But obviously she was distraught. I then made my way into a couple courtrooms. I've been in a lot of courtrooms in my life. I've tried a lot of cases, both big courtrooms, small courtrooms. You have the circuit court, you have the Court of Appeals, you have the Supreme Court, been in all of them, been in the local traffic courts and family courts. This looks a lot like family courts, except I saw a lot of kids. There were any range from 5 to 15, some with parents, some not. I saw a cute little 5-year-old. He was speaking to the judge very articulately, but it is striking to see that many kids in one place. I saw a lot of moms. I didn't see a whole lot. I don't know that I recall seeing one dad there. But obviously it was nerve-wracking. And so that was striking to me. The other thing that was striking to me, I went into another courtroom. A lady was up there and talking to the judge, and the judge informs her that her husband had been detained. Apparently she knew about that, but then he says, "Are you aware that your husband has chosen to self-deport?" And she obviously was surprised by that. And then the judge says, and again, he's just doing his job. Or do you want to self-deport as well? Do you want to voluntarily deport as well? And I may not be using the right phraseology or legal terms here. Again, I'm not an immigration attorney. I'm just telling you what kind of I heard. But she says, "Look, I want to stay here. I want to fight. I have kids here. I'm also terrified of going home and being hurt." And so the judge gave a court date, and I guess there's some type of process to challenge being removed and all that. I'm not an immigration lawyer, so I don't know the mechanics of it. But then she asked something that was probably stuck with me the most out of the whole experience. She said, "If I go outside, am I going to be picked up by immigration?" And essentially, is ICE going to throw me into a van? And the judge, again, doing their job, said, "I don't have that information." Not being flippant, not being disrespectful, not being aggressive, literally just said, "I don't know," as if she'd asked me, "Is immigration going to pick you upside?" And he's like, "I don't know the answer to that." DHS attorney, he said, "Does the DHS attorney have information?" The DHS attorney had no information either. Again, not being disrespectful, just, "I don't have any information." And that's what, for some reason, it really triggered me. And it really hit in my mind because I've been hearing about this term, alligator Alcatraz, and I've kind of thought of it as like kind of absurd, kind of almost a joke. But then I realized, and I don't know why it took me this long to kind of hit me. There's a lot going on. We're all busy living our lives, and I think that's part of what Trump administration is counting on is either you're a full Trump loyalist or you're just not paying attention. It made me realize the whole point of that is to have folks in absolute fear constantly, whether or not they've committed a crime or not, whether or not they have status or not, particularly if they're a minority, particularly if they're Hispanic. He wants, and Stephen Miller wants, to make sure that people are visualizing being ripped apart by alligators, being torn apart by animals. And in essence, they want you to realize that the administration sees you as an animal that can easily be killed. And when I think about why that guy chose to self-report, why that father chose to self-deport, I can only, as a dad, think about what must have compelled him to ultimately make that decision. What causes you to choose to say, "I'm going to leave my family. I'm going to leave my children"? And I think it's the fear of being sent to a place like Alligator Alcatraz or El Salvador, these places where the MAGA movement is really celebrating this, which I've always just found amazing when you talk about, because the conservative makeup, even with the Trump brand, is pro-life, anti-abortion. Fine. That is your position. How does that then square with the willingness, and not only the willingness, but the enjoyment of things like Alligator Alcatraz, where it's a joke to you that people are going to be separated from their families and going to be torn apart? It's just really striking. The other thing that really struck me was this big, beautiful bill, the budget that passed that cut Medicaid and all that kind of stuff. They gave a ton of money, billions and billions of dollars, for immigration enforcement. Here is an article from the AP, Trump administration. It talks about firing 17 immigration court judges. This is dated July 15th, so earlier this week. But what it points out, and let me see if I can find it easily. On a recent legislation that passed that will use $170 billion to supercharge immigration enforcement, the court are set to get an infusion of $3.3 billion that will go to raising numbers of judges to 800 and hiring more staff. Well, where are we at right now? There are currently 600 judges, according to union figures. Immigration courts fall under the Justice Department. What that is saying is that of the over $100 billion in money, a small fraction is going to the courts. You're going to go from 600 odd judges to 800. So you're going to have essentially 200 more judges. When you're going to have countless, and I think Stephen Miller's goal was to get 3,000 or deportations a day, if I recall correctly. You're going to have countless cases being piled on to a judiciary that you're going to only add a small fraction of judges to it. And that's, again, it all wraps into Alligator, Alcatraz, El Salvador. What they're saying is, we are not going to give you due process. We're going to lock you away into a detainment center, whether it's in the United States or abroad, that is going to be violent, dangerous, and essentially going to force you to choose to either go there and wait for an indeterminate amount of time or get your butt out of the country. And that's their goal. It's not about humanity. It's not about due process. It's not about actually following the law. It is about using a violent policy in order to scare the hell out of people, to make fathers have to choose to self-deport, to get away from their kids and to get away from their wives, because they're worried essentially about being sent to effectively a death sentence. That's what this is about. Because if it wasn't about that, then I've always heard the saying, don't listen to what governments say through their statements. Don't listen to politicians say through their statements. You figure out what they really want through the budgets. And this budget speaks volumes. This big, beautiful bill, the whole point of it speaks volumes. And what is so interesting about the whole thing is how obviously cynical the bill is. And, I've spoken to colleagues of mine across on the other side of the aisle, especially when I've talked about concerns about Medicaid cuts. And what they've said to me is, James, that's just Democratic talking points. Trump is not going to cut Medicaid. Hell, most of the supporters support Medicaid. Why would he do that? And they just flat out question that. That's just a talking point. But when I think, in order to think about what's going on here, look about what is clear that the big, beautiful bill does. And I'm going to share another article with you. This is from Kiplinger, which is a finance thing. This is not, CNN. This is talking about what this big, beautiful bill does. And what I want you to do is think about the estate tax. What is the estate tax? Do you know what the estate tax is? You may not know. Frankly, I don't really understand it because it never is going to apply to me. The estate tax is essentially the ability for very, very rich people to pass on their estates to their family without paying tax. And so one of the priorities in this bill is to increase the estate tax for single filers up to $15 million and up to $30 million for married couples. That is one of the top priorities of this bill. If you're a Trump supporter, why the hell would you care about this? Unless you're in that, if you're an average person, why would you care about this? Why does it even matter? What was it last year? Okay, let's take a look at that. Last year for single filer, it was $13,999,000. So essentially, the estate tax went up to protect an additional $1 million for super wealthy. When I think about Trump supporters, they are more likely living a life like me than they are for people that benefit from this estate tax. They're more likely to send their kids to public school. They're more likely, if they're lucky, to live in a single family home or even less. They're more likely to have gone to a state school, to come out of school with student loans, to be working in small businesses. I'm a small business owner, to be doing a lot of the hats in that small business. I'm not, hiring, scaling up and all that stuff where, you own a software company like Bezos and that kind of thing. No, I'm doing the hard work on the ground. It may be more on the thought side rather than the physical side. I'm lucky there because I'm a lawyer, but I'm the one doing this stuff. So I'm more like you, if you're a Trump supporter, than the difference between you and I and you and Don Jr., right? And so how is it that is the priority of the bill, and immigration is a priority of the bill? And so that it's about money. Obviously, it's about money. And it makes me think about the old saying about what what the powerful do is they take money, they steal from everybody, and then they divide them. They divide the poor people, and they blame it on the poor. They blame it on minorities, and that's exactly what's happening. What is speaking through this bill? You have billionaires getting tax cuts. You have Medicaid cuts happening. If you don't want to believe it, we're going to figure it out in the next couple of years. And then you have immigrants being terrorized. I mean, that is what is happening here. So, that's my thoughts for what it's worth. I would highly recommend, I urge you, go and not monitor, but go and observe your local courts. Go and observe your local immigration courts. See what's happening and do it again in a respectful manner. I again think that if we're respectful, not only in our observations, but also when we protest, I think if we're respectful, that is more compelling than, something turned violent and stuff like that. We are not the January 6th guys, right? We don't support that. That's my observations. I likely will go back and observe more. We'll see, what happens there. It just depends on timing. You can see I'm here at my home office. My baby is rocking to sleep right in the next door, and I'm monitoring her while my wife's going to pick up my toddler, and I'm finishing out things for the week. So just trying to get things done. Hopefully you found this useful. Feel free to comment. If you have questions or issues you want to talk about, if you think that there's issues that need to be discussed that are local impact, come on. If you think that local leaders should be on here, bring them on. Like I said, I'm going to get hopefully Senator Salim on soon, and hopefully some other electeds, but also local leaders like Liz White. So I hope you find this useful. And I do wish you guys the best weekend. And until then, take care. Remember, we're all in this together. Stay safe and keep it up. All right, guys.